we have a very special series coming forward. It's the humor of it all. We're going to learn about not only success, we're going to learn about comedy, but also how to achieve your goals in entrepreneurship. Hello, family. Pastor George here, ready for another exciting episode of Set for Life. We have someone here today that's not a heavyweight. Maybe he might be a welterweight, but he'll let us know. We're going to be blessed today by having with us Dannon Green. Dannon, how you doing?
Brother George, thanks so much for having me, man. Appreciate it, man.
Man, I've been waiting for us to have this talk for quite some time.
I've been waiting too.
Right. By the way, he's a comedian too. But also, hey, you have a documentary and you also have done a movie in the area, and it's The Executioners. Can you just tell us a little bit about, and I just want to just get right into it, a little bit about how that came about and then just how you went through the process?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's good to be here. A lot of people don't know I'm a former Golden Gloves fighter, amateur fighter, won the Golden Gloves back in '89 and '90 when I was in college. I actually won it while I was in grad school, believe it or not. But the documentary came about a gym called The Executioners, which is what where I used to box out of Philadelphia. It was the name of a gym. And so over the years, I moved when I was younger. I lost my mom when I was younger, so I had to move out of Philly. So I fought there for like 2.5 years, and then I left. But I still knew all of the fighters there because I had grew up with a number of them. So over the years, you know, time went on. I stayed in boxing. I stayed involved in boxing. I continued to fight. And then, you know, fast forwarding, I moved out to California and got into the entertainment as a stand-up comic. The documentary came about, went back home one time to do a show in Philadelphia, and one of my former teammates, Lydell Johnson, he came to the show. So when he came to the show, I was asking about the other fighters, and I go, hey, you know, what about Frank? I actually had thought Frank, who was one of the trainers, co-owners of the club, had passed. I knew the guy that started it, Marvin Tucci Gordon, he had passed in '96. So I thought Frank was deceased too. He said, no, Frank is doing well. Like, I thought, oh, okay, so you got a number for him? And then he said, yeah. So he gave me his phone number. This was in August 2017. So I didn't call him right away. And then one day in October, I said to him, I called him. I said, let me call Frank, see how you doing. Now, over the years, we had heard about The Executioners, but it was under a boxer named Bernard Hopkins.
Right.
So he called himself The Executioner, and he was and is from Philadelphia. So, you know, over the years, I never really kind of put two and two together, but I kind of said, maybe he got the name, but, you know, but we just we never thought about it. So it was about October of 2017. I was, you know, actually just laying down in my bed chilling. I said, man, let me give Frank a call. So I called him and I said to him, I said, hey, yes, Frank, you know, Frank Taylor there. And he goes, yeah, this is Frank Taylor. I said, hey, Frank, this is Dannon Green. I used to box for you when I was a kid. And he goes, Dannon Green. He goes, Dannon Green, Felton Street, Southpaw. Good fighter. Yeah, I remember you. And it just touched me.
Wow.
I ain't seen a man over 30 years.
Right.
Like maybe longer,
right,
since 81, 82. So we talked for a period of time. And then I said to him, and then something just hit me. I said, Frank, you know, I want to tell the story about The Executioners. I said, because I knew Tucci had passed and he was still alive, but he was 78 at the time. And I said, if something should happen to him before any one of us, all of that whole story goes to the grave with him. So I said, Frank, I'd like to do your story. And he said, man, you know, and kind of what your show deals with, a lot of people don't understand how to get stories out there. You know what I'm saying? Unless you're in Hollywood, or now maybe because you have social media, you kind of can learn a little bit. But a lot of people in the inner cities and these towns outside of Hollywood, they don't know, they have stories, but they don't know how to get them out, get them out. Right. So he goes to me, he says, man, I always felt there was a story there. I just never knew how to tell it. You know what I mean? Wow. And I said, look, let me, you know, give me the rights to tell this story. So he said, yeah. So I was doing pretty well at the time commercially, and I had saved up some money. And then I had a partner, this guy that I met from the Bay Area, and he had a lot of equipment. He had top-notch cameras. So I called him up and I said, look, man, I'd like to know if you want to do a project with me. Because he had the camera work, but he didn't know how to get involved in Hollywood. Right. I said, and I had did a show for them before. I said, well, look, man, I got a project and I want to do it, and a documentary. I said, you got the cameras. I said, would you be interested? So he said, well, what are the numbers? So I crunched the numbers. I told him what I could bring to the table, pretty much most of my savings, you know what I mean? And then when he said, I gave him the numbers, and he said, man, I think I can do this. So we went into partnership. I knew it's a story that's so phenomenal because anybody involved in any neighborhood, you always have that person. You always say, it's this one guy, he was better than Jordan, or this dude here, he could have been, you know what I mean? Right. Well, I went to a gym that we probably should have probably had about 8 or 9 world champions. Right. And I'm talking about top notch, because one guy from my gym beat Bernard Hopkins twice in the amateurs. Right. So, and his story is phenomenal, Mike Wells. Yeah. So we wind up putting together a crew. I went back to Philadelphia 4 times. And the first week I went was the week of January 2018, the Super Bowl week. Mm-hmm. Like I went that week before and I left on Super Bowl day. That was the year the Eagles beat the Patriots.
I say you bring that up.
Yeah. I just thought I'd let you know we do got one in the can.
All right,
you know what I mean? So I went back for the whole week. I set up all the interviews. I had that first week I set up 13 interviews.
Oh, wow.
Man, my voice was gone. It was just shot. But each guy had their time, and each one of them was on time. And these, you saw the doc. These are grown men now, but they wasn't no choir boys when they was younger. You know what I mean?
And that's part of how it showed. That
yes.
was great. That was a part of the story that
yes.
just said where people just kept going through life.
Right.
And he did a great job of chronicalizing it and everything. And then also the way he did the voiceovers, like we got to see the story.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because what I did was I wrote the story before I went out there. So I just imagined how I wanted to tell the story. And I wrote the story on 4x5 cards, and I had 169 4x5 cards. And each one, it literally was written, my voiceover, what the footage was going to be, all of that. So we go to Philadelphia, and we shoot that first week. And they just give me some good interviews, but I knew I had something when I interviewed Frank first. And we were sitting down, and I was asking him to talk about it, I just asked him one question. I probably asked him 2 or 3 questions, and then he just ran with it. And this man's 78 at the time, mind of an elephant, like just sharp. So he's doing the interview, and he's talking to me, and he starts talking about what the kids did for him, and then he started tearing up, and I looked at when it was finished with him, I looked at my boy. I said, we got something,
right?
Because when a man, anybody, but when a man tears up off of something, that means there's some type of emotion that he's been holding for a period of time. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so once he did that, and then I interviewed the next guy, and he teared up. And I was like, okay, we ain't gonna have everybody crying on set here, but
right.
It just got to the point where we just had a great story. So I wound up interviewing about 11 ex-fighters. And then I wound up getting Mark Breland. Yeah. I got Mark Breland. I had Buddy McGirt from New York, Mark Breland, Buddy McGirt, Carlos Palomino. All of these guys, these are Hall of Fame fighters. I had like top notch, the interviews. And it was important because, the way that, the world is now, everything's so fast, we forget that history. You know what I'm saying? And these guys were like, we wound up having like 6 guys invited to the Olympic trials. Right. We had guys ranked as high as number 2 in the country as amateurs down to number 5. We had about 4 or 5 of those. And my boy Mike Wells, he was ranked number 5 in the country when Mark Breland was ranked number 2. That's just how, close we were. Right. So, I went back 4 times to Philadelphia in about a 6-month period, went to New York, went to North Carolina, so I was, I was just traveling, man. I was really like out there just doing it. And we wound up getting some great footage. And then I wrote the story, and I used about 4 or 5 editors on the project. And, we just got it down. I had friends do me some big favors. I have a friend in town who's a music producer, and he gave me access to his music library, 1,400 songs. Like, yo, Dan, do what you got to do. You know what I mean? Then I had another producer out of Connecticut, my boy Steven Sticks, who I did some movies with before. I was in his movies. He makes music, he produces music, and he made me like 4 or 5 tracks. So I had, that stuff can become very expensive. Okay. And I had to go and hustle to get that. And then I interviewed one of the people in the documentary was a guy named, not a guy, but a gentleman, Russell Peltz. And Russell Peltz has been in the boxing game over 40, 50 years. He's like 71 or 2 or 73 now. But he was the main promoter for the fights out of Philadelphia at the time, out of the Blue Horizon. I think you might have seen him in the doc.
Yeah.
He was the gentleman that I got mostly all my boxing footage from. So I just hustled, man. I just, found a way to put the pieces together. And we wound up putting something pretty, tight together. We got accepted into 12 film festivals. We won awards in 2. And I also was in the Manhattan Film Festival. And we went there. They through the pandemic, it was kind of put on hold, but they lifted it last year, and we wound up going to New York for the film festival. And that was kind of a big highlight for me. That was kind of emotional for me because I was born out of New York. Born, and a little bit about my background. I'm a foster kid, so I'm born out of New York. And then to be able to come back to New York and show a movie I made was, I thought that was pretty cool, pretty sweet.
You know that God loves you?
Yeah, he's had his hand on me, bro.
So everybody, I just want to just say a couple of things. And by the way, everybody, I want everybody in the chat right now to pat me on the back. I did a good job of listening. I didn't interrupt him. There was about 5 opportunities I had to interrupt him, I didn't.
I was waiting too.
Okay.
No, kidding.
People who watch the show know that I was interrupting all the way through. But I want people who have an aspiration, because I'm someone that came from another state to California, to understand that you got to have the drive and that God walks you through it.
Yes.
You had an idea and you executed on that.
Right.
He took the step.
Right.
Then God blessed you. You can't look at nobody else.
Right.
He blessed. I'm going through the blessing. By the way, I wrote some of them down. He helped me out. The one where the gentleman had all the camera equipment. So you didn't have the camera equipment.
No.
You have no means to it.
No.
And it's not saying no means to it, but you had it. But then you did do certain things right. He did save the money. By the way, we have whole videos on that.
Right.
You did save the money.
Right.
But you kept moving forward. Then you had the connections. You see, God is your source, and then God gives you resources.
Right.
He gave you financial resources, but then I think pound for pound, and I'm going to check with our real estate guru and executive producer, Danette. Danette always says, but see, these are the resources.
Right.
The resources were the cameras. The resources were the connections.
Yeah.
The way you can just pick up a phone and call people, and then they come down. When I was watching the video, and then they're doing it. By the way, he's about to interrupt me. Watch that. See,
well, because I want to share this story with you. I think it's really important.
No.
It's on the line of how God can put you in places.
God does it.
So let me tell you how I met him, my partner.
Right.
So I'm doing a show up in Oakland.
Right.
And Oakland is one of my towns. Like Oakland, if anybody's from the East Coast and you've been to the Bay Area, it's the closest thing you'll get to the East Coast. You know what I mean? I always tell people when I came out, between the weather and the vibe, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I have a show up in Oakland, and I've done a number of shows up there because it's been a good town for me. So this one show I did a show, and the same promoter would usually take me back to the whole airport in the morning. Yeah. So he calls me in the morning and says, Dan, I can't take you tomorrow. I got an emergency. I'm going to have my cousin take you.
Right.
I said, okay, no problem. Right. So his cousin picks me up, and he goes, and we get to chatting, and he's like, yo. I go, yo. I said, man, y'all have some good equipment up in there. I said, Rated R has some good equipment up in there. He said, oh, no. He said, no, that's my equipment. So I said, oh, is it? So I said, oh, okay. He said, yeah, man, we trying to do some, some hood videos and documentaries and stories. He was saying all that. I said, okay. I said, well, I write screenplays. The execution of the documentary wasn't even in the picture. This was 2 years before that. Wasn't even in the picture. I said, I write movies because I write screenplays. He said, okay. So we got to chat and we exchanged numbers and we was cool. Well, he happened to be the dude I called. He happened to be the one to go into partnership with me for it. So if it wasn't, and I don't like that. I don't like to make it sound like cliche, but it's really true. If it wasn't for God having him have to take me to the airport instead of the guy that usually takes me, it may never happen the way that it happened.
Right. And so just so you know and everybody else knows. So in the Bible it says in Philippians 4:19, it says, my God shall supply all of my needs. But then hold on, comma, according to his riches and glory.
Right.
See, that's where people miss it. See, what they're doing is they're waiting for, I'm sitting at home right now waiting to be blessed. Somebody's gonna bless me. I'm like, no. God already has it.
Right.
God gave that, so he's not here, but if we talk to him, he'd say, God blessed him with that equipment. Like he got it from something that God blessed him with.
Right.
And then God had that man drive you to the airport and for you to do that and for you to be able to tell a story.
But it's also important. Right. It's also important for people to understand. You have to, when things happen, you don't look at them as saying, "Oh, well, this happened for a reason," but you have to always remember, if you have some type of goal or some type of dream or something that you're trying to do, then it's important for you, quote unquote, to execute it, because you don't know throughout your life and throughout your travels what person or people that can come in and help you out.
Right.
So if I had this idea about the documentary, but I never wanted to, if I never did it, then I would have never thought about calling, my partner and saying, "Yo, I got this project." It just would have been an ideal. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And I want to come right back to that.
Yeah.
So one of the things we always go through, and what we want to make sure people do, is that they have a goal and then they write it down.
That's what I do.
And then they execute on it and do what you can with what you have.
Right.
And then God works out the rest.
Well, that's December 31st for me every year.
Right.
Because every year I have my goals written down.
Right.
I've kept a journal for a number of years.
Right.
And I write down what I want to achieve. And it's amazing when you can look back and go, "Oh my God, like you did this or I did that." And those were things that I wanted to do. One of my big goals when I moved to California was, to have either, and I'm not finished with it, but I wanted to have a movie on the small screen or on the big screen. Now, I did have my documentary on the small screen, and we showed it on the big screen, but I want to have it where people are going to the theaters, and I have projects right now that were in the works for that possibility. So I've always set, along with you saying, I've set goals, and some people don't believe in goals, because goals are like that. It's the January 1st to the 31st. Right. You know what I mean? I'm gonna go to the gym, I'm gonna work out. You know what I mean? And then 29th, you forget. You know what I mean?
I'm gonna lose weight.
I'm gonna lose weight. And then
I'm gonna stop hanging around.
Yeah.
What is it? Well, there's a whole list of them.
Yeah, and then by the 29th of January, it's like, well, I still got March, and then summer comes and every barbecue, and now you're looking at next year. So my thing was always been, to just really stay on top of things, and I've always been that kind of guy, what I'm saying, kind of person to stay focused, because nobody's gonna make a move for you.
Right.
You know what I mean? Nobody, worldly or godly, nobody's gonna make the move. You got to make the move. And then the reaction off your move is going to let you know where you land. Right.
So I want to make a comment. I want you to hear you color in for me. So what I'm noticing is, what I've observed in life is that what happens is, as you push forward, if you sit there and wait for everything to happen, nothing happens.
Right.
But then when you go, people start gravitating toward what you're doing.
Right.
It's like an example, like you're pushing a cart up a hill, then all of a sudden other people go, "Hey, let's help her. Let's see how we can do this, how we can do this,
That is very
how we can do this together."
Yeah.
And look at how people also came to what you did.
Yeah.
Then also some of the quotes. If you look at also in the movie, one of the things that just stuck out to me was everybody started off, but then gradually people started kind of falling off. Like this would happen to someone, then they couldn't.
Right.
This person got hurt this kind of way. Someone hurt their eye, did this, and then they just kind of fell off. Like, people started doing it.
With life decisions.
What separates the people that keep going? Remember, there's a starters club?
Yeah.
That's everybody's in it. Remember, what is it? I'm gonna go to college. I'm gonna lose weight. I'm gonna stop hanging around the people. I'm gonna graduate. I'm gonna go to college.
Right.
And there's a finishers club.
Right.
What separates those? In your opinion, from what you're doing, what separates?
Well,
those?
what separates them? Well, let me go back a little bit and tell you how I got out here.
Right.
My late brother, was living out here at the time, but I never wanted to be in California. I'm an East Coast boy, so I wanted to go right out of college.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to, I went to Ohio State, got my master's degree. Okay. So once I got my master's degree, I left. I wanted to go back to the East Coast, get into it. My brother was living out here. He's like, "Yo, you should look out here." Well, I started comedy in Ohio. Mm-hmm. Now, this story is important because it kind of goes to what your question. So I met this comedian at the club one night. His name was Rich Scheidner, a white guy, Jewish comic, played in Roxanne with Steve Martin back in the day. So we're sitting there at the bar, and I've been talking to him. I'm up there every day of his week in Columbus, and I'm gravitating, asking him questions and things like that. And then he said to me, I said, "Well, man, I can't tell," because this was like 91. Right. I said, "I can't tell where I'm at with my career." See, I started in the white clubs. Right. So when I first started, I'd never even cursed. Like, I was literally, that's why I can do clean and I can do secular shows, because I started in the white clubs. Right. And I wrote like that. So I asked him, I said, I can't really judge where I'm at. And then he said something to me that I thought was very, very interesting, George. He said, how old are you? I said, I'm 26. He said, you should move to California. And I said, why you say that? He said, because you seem like a person that won't get caught up in the lights. And see, that's what happens with most people. They get out here, and I don't want to say sell their soul, but they sell their dreams. So they get caught up out here. So when he told me that, I was like, okay, I got a place to stay, why not? And he told me, he said, when you come out here, if someone gives you their business card, you call them twice. If they don't call you, you just keep the card, you keep it pushing. Sure. So what happens with a lot of people is everybody, they have that initial goal. They have that initial dream. They have that initial drive to get there. And then what happens is, along the way, they hit a bump, or they got to get a job, or they meet a girl or a guy, or what happens, someone passes in their family, and they emotionally can't handle all of the stress that comes along with it, because it's never really something usually good unless you get a job and you go, I'm making 6 figures more than, this, and then you go, well, you know what? But then usually what happens is you get a job, you might want to get in the family, or you get relaxed, those dreams get...
And you get distracted.
Right. So, but a lot of times it's some type of situation that happened that causes people to kind of divert from their initial goal.
Right.
So I always tell people, man, like my whole thing is, when I came out here, I was like, I'm gonna stay focused. I'm gonna stay laser focused. Now I've had my up and downs and things out here in terms of relationships that pulls you one way or another. But most people, what they can't do, what I've always been able to do is always get back on track.
Yeah, you know what? You know what's interesting? It's that same thing that you say about in the entertainment industry.
Yes.
Is the same thing with athletics.
Right.
What happens? Exactly. People come on to athletics, and then what happens is in high school, or you go to certain meetings, and there's a couple people there. When you get in college, it's like a lot more, and it's a lot more. It's a more intensity. Right. What happens is people get caught up. I'm going to use your term, in the lights.
Right.
And they forget the substance.
Right.
You see, it's like you have to learn. So what happens is when you get tired or when you get unmotivated, you have to fall back to consistency and discipline in doing that.
Yeah. I'm gonna tell you what happened to me.
Right.
Growing up, I used to be a track dude. I used to be fast.
Okay.
Yeah. Not no more. I got 2 reconstructed knees, so I ain't fast anymore. But I've always made every track team. I always made every relay team. Right. I ran independent relays in 6th grade. Okay. In Philadelphia. So, excuse me. And then I was boxing. Right. I have an art background. Yeah. So, and all of these things I would get involved in, and I would be good, but I never became a superstar. And that's because even with me, I would get right there to the top, and I'd be like, maybe I'll do something else. Right. And when I started doing stand-up, I remember I had this terrible set one night, and it was at the old Mavericks Flat Club, and with J. Anthony Brown, and he killed me. He roasted me to death, and I was like, "This ain't for me. Like, I shouldn't be doing this." And then I thought about all them other times that I had got right here, and I said, I can't quit this time. Right. And I always tell people, I use the example now of the movie The Perfect Storm. Yeah. And at the end of the movie when they were trying, it was like the last tidal wave. You know what I mean? If they got over the top, they could see the sun, but they knew if they got over the top, that they would make it. But the minute they got to the top, the boat gave out and the tidal wave got it, and it went from being sunny to they were under the water and they all, they passed. So my whole thing is like, I never wanted to quit. I said, I can't quit, I can't give up, because if I do it, I know I'm gonna regret it. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people.
And so what that is, that's called a point, everyone will remember this, a point of inflection. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, I'd ask you to write it down, I write it down, but I know you guys type it down and doing it, but it's called a point of inflection.
Right.
One time, like people reach them, like Oprah had a very famous one. She went to a boxing match, was sitting in the front row, long time ago, and it was a boxing match with Mike Tyson was there. Right. And then she was sitting there and they said, weighing in at 219 pounds, the heavyweight champion of the world, Mike Tyson. She said, I weigh 221. So I could be the heavyweight champion. Right. And then worked out. Right. I had that in college. And I had that where our coach came back from the Olympics and wanted to cut everybody. And I wore a weight vest during the entire off season. Wow. You have to go and find that. So what I encourage you and what I encourage all of our listeners is to do the exact same thing, is to go back and look at certain areas and look at the drive, get your team together, and then walk through what God has for you. Yeah. And again, I want to thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Set for Life. But hold on, can you come back? Because I want to talk to you a little bit about comedy. Can you come back and we'll do another episode a little bit later on and do one on I Gotta Get Your Comedy. Then did you guys see all those things he was saying? He said he has degrees and everything. Then he said he's from Ohio State. So then, I got to talk to him a little bit about the Midwest, and doing that. But what we really want to do is encourage you to move forward. If you have dreams, there is literally a dream team standing around you to help you achieve your goals, whether it is in music, whether it's in art, whether it's in business. We already talked about it in the area of finance, but we'll make sure that we get you on our next episode. So hey, continue to tune in to Set for Life, where we live our life by design, not by default.